Hello everyone, it's Tracy here, back with another video. So I'm going to start by creating a watercolor background with 3 different colored distress inks. I have the shaded lilac, the abandoned coral, and the seedless preserves. And I'm just smushing a little bit of ink onto my nonstick craft sheet with each of those ink pads. And then I have a cup with a paintbrush and water off to the side that you can't see, but I'm just going to squirt a little bit of water on each of those inks, just because you need quite a bit of water to make it more of the watercolor look. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my paintbrush to apply some of that watercolor onto my watercolor cardstock. This is the Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock, and it measures 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And I'm just creating like 3 different sections, but they're just going to blend together. So you can see I did the shaded lilac in the top left-hand corner, and then the seedless preserves more towards the bottom, and then I'll fill in the other side with the abandoned coral. And I'm not going all the way to the edge. I am going to leave a little bit of white space. I think that just adds a little bit more to your watercolor when you leave the white space and don't fill it in completely. So I'll go ahead and add a little bit more of the shaded lilac. I just want those colors to blend together. And then I used my heat tool to dry this completely, but you could let it dry with just air if you wanted. It just takes longer. Alright, so now I'm going to create my tag. I am using the W+9 sketch that I'll have on my blog. So there's this rounded tag, and I don't have one of those, so I'm going to create my own. You can see I have that 3rd size spellbinders, and I took my ruler and measured what the diameter of that was, and then I cut a piece of vellum that was the same width across so that there wasn't any extra. You can see that it goes right to the edges. And I'm going to tape that into place. Now I'm going to do some partial die cutting so that the top of it is rounded and then the bottom is still looks like the tag. If you look at that sketch from W+9, there's like that rounded tag on there, and that is what I want to create. So this is another way to use your dies and kind of stretch them and use them for something else instead of like just a circle die cut. So you can see I'm putting that onto the embossing plate and then using my washi tape to tape that into place, because half of that die is hanging off. The half that's not on those plates is not going to die cut, so only the rounded edge will. So then you'll be able to see that when I take that off, I have this rounded tag that looks like the one from the W+9 sketch. And you can do this with any size circle die cuts or from any company. You just have to measure to make sure that your diameter is the same width across as the rectangle of cardstock or vellum like I used. There is a little bit of excess on that one side, but I just used my trimmer to trim that off. You can see right there, there's that little bump, and I just trimmed that off. So now I'm using the W+9 Unforgettable stamp set. I thought this one was so cute, and there's so many great examples of cards online, so I just had to pick that one up myself. So I'm using the elephant and the balloon, and I am going to stamp these on a piece of Coordination's 110-pound cardstock with my Tuxedo Black Memento ink, because I am going to be coloring those in with Copic markers. So I went ahead and placed those stamps on my cardstock and then picked them up with my clear acrylic block, and then I'm going to ink that up with my Tuxedo Black Memento ink. And then I can go ahead and stamp them down onto my cardstock, and then I did hit them with my heat tool to make sure that the ink was completely dried before I started coloring them in. Alright, so I went ahead and fussy cut those out, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I'm stamping this with my Versamark ink on a piece of black cardstock, and then I'm going to cover that with my Hero Arts white embossing powder. And I apologize that I have this huge band-aid on my hand that I didn't have at the beginning. I had to stop the video, and I was printing out a piece of paper, and my kitten got really scared, and she was in my hands, and she completely scratched my left hand. So I thought it was better to have the band-aid on there than what was underneath. So then I went ahead and cut 2 pieces of grass using the Lawn Fawn Grassy Border die. And I cut those that and the sentiment to be the same width as the tag. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some adhesive with my ATG gun and then add those on to my tag. And I just was kind of seeing where I wanted to place all of that, just because the sentiment was a little bit thicker and I didn't want it all the way at the bottom of the tag. And then there's a little bit of excess on the one side of the tag, so I just took my scissors and trimmed that off. So then I can go ahead and adhere the elephant and the balloon, and I'm just going to keep those flat as well because I am going to use some foam squares on the back of the tag, so I didn't want too much dimension on there. You could also use a liquid glue to adhere those if you like. And then I didn't add any adhesive to the balloon string because I'm just going to tuck that right behind the elephant, and then it won't move anywhere on my card. Alright, and then I did punch the hole at the top of that tag. You could just leave it if you don't want a hole there, but I am going to tie some May Arts natural twine into a bow around the top. And I used my We Are Memory Keepers crocodile to do that. You could use any size hole punch because that one is a little bit big. I could have used a smaller one, but any size will do. And then I'm going to trim off the excess of my bow. So then I'm going to go ahead and adhere that onto my watercolor cardstock. Now I am using the Cool Tack clear foam squares. I could use regular foam squares though because I am just putting them on the back of like where the cardstock and the images are on the front, so you won't see them anyway. So you could use regular foam squares, but I just used the clear tack ones. I really like these. The only thing I don't like is that the backings are extremely hard to get off. I actually just skipped over that part in this video because it took me so long to get them off, and I was getting quite frustrated, but otherwise they work really well and they stick really well. So then I'll just adhere that right onto my watercolor cardstock piece. And then adhere that onto a white A2 size card base, and you can make that by just cutting an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in half, and I did it the long way so that this is a top folding card. Alright, a few final embellishments. I'm going to take some white sequins and use my Tombow Mono Multi Glue to adhere those into place. And then I'm going to take my clear Wink of Stella glitter pen and just color in the balloon. And then I'll also go over that with some glossy accents because that's just a fun little touch and it makes the balloon look more realistic on your card. And then of course you're just going to want to let that glossy accents and the sequin glue dry completely before you would send that in the mail. It doesn't take too long to dry depending on what type of climate you live in, but I'd say probably give it about 24 hours just to make sure that it's completely dried. Alright, and then that is my finished card for today, so thank you so much for watching. If you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I would love that. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys back here next time. Bye!